Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. Like 99% of the population, she hates Brussels sprouts, Leanne Hughes.
Hey, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. Now, as facilitators, we need to show up. And this was part of my conversation with Mark Bowden. Half the battle of actually doing the job is just getting there, is just showing up. And our clients, whether they're internal or external, they pay for us to show up. And they don't want the half-charged 50% battery version of yourself. Often they want the 100% charged up version of yourself for the time that you're there, whether that's the hour, the day, or the week, or even longer, the 100% version. So in this episode, I chat with today's guest, Nicholas King, about how to strive to become the best version of yourself as a facilitator to make a difference in others' lives. And that's what we're doing as facilitators. We want some kind of transformation with an individual or a group from when they arrive. We want something different when they exit, when they leave. And usually we want this to be pretty positive, right? But now sometimes that change is not as obvious as having a complete transformation. Sometimes it is simply about raising awareness on a topic, on a thought. Maybe it's choices that you're making in your life. So you've consciously made a choice to become a better workshop facilitator. And that's why you're listening to the show. And there's so much going on in our lives that we're making all these choices on that we may or may not be aware of, or may not think that we can control. Now, while this topic is all about facilitation's episode is about facilitation, I also think there's a ton of really incredible life lessons that you can pick up with my interview with Nicholas, which you can then apply into your workshop. Some really powerful questions that he shares in this episode and some lessons he's learned. Now, Nicholas King, he is based in Brisbane, same city as me. He is a wonderful, entertaining, very humorous person. He's a facilitator, trainer, and speaker. And we connected first through my favorite social platform, LinkedIn, of course. And then I met him and his wonderful wife, Holly, at the 100th episode party back in early January. And geez, he's really funny and a really compelling storyteller. So you can only imagine what he's like when he shows up at a workshop, when he's, sort of charged. Not that he wasn't charged when I saw him, but, when he has to sort of amp it up, particularly on stage. Now, as you know, I do like a bit of unpredictability in my workshops, and Nicholas blew me away with an example that he shares in this one relating to one of my favorite actors, Tom Cruise. Now, he's put a bit of a challenge out there as well in this conversation. This is a very neat and novel challenge. So please connect with both of us on LinkedIn. And if you can pull off what he did in your workshops, well, first of all, please video it or get a photo or something and tell us the story of how you did it. I'll be very impressed. So Nicholas King, who is he? He is a highly engaging speaker, MC, trainer, facilitator, and coach that helps others become better versions of themselves. He's also the principal facilitator and trainer in the Sales Enablement and Performance team for Oracle Sales and Partner Academy, where he provides training, facilitation, and sales performance coaching within the Oracle digital portfolio. And he's a member of a couple of Toastmasters clubs and also is the president of the Oracle Toastmasters Club. He is an international speaker on thinking in mechanics that delivers insight into the most important leadership role any one of us will ever have, the leadership of ourselves. And that's what we really dig into in this episode. And you'll also learn things related to facilitation. So things like some awesome gadgets to use during and after your workshop. And I actually, a couple of months ago, we recorded this conversation and I put a link to the clicker that Nicholas talks about, X Factor, very cool. We look at how you can track your performance to be more consistent and also some tips of connecting on social media. So if you do want to reach out to Nicholas or Nicholas got a really great tip and we'll put a link to both of our our LinkedIn profiles in the show notes for this one. So if you'd like to connect with us, if you'd like to find out more, links to Nicholas's website, and also if you'd like to continue the conversation when this episode is over, you can join the community of I think we've got over 650 facilitators from all over the world sharing their tips, activities, experiences with the group. And again, a link to that is in the show notes over at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 110. I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. Now onto the show. I'm delighted to welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast, Nicholas King. Nicholas, it's so great to have you here. We met a couple of weeks ago. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to be here. Love the show. Been listening to it since the early days. So it's kind of a bit pinch myself moment to be on it, contributing to it.
I'm pinching myself that you're here. I mean, it's funny because I saw your little pixel face on LinkedIn. Then we met in person and now we're doing this. I love how relationships sort of change over time with social media and podcasting and the beautiful technology that we have now. Now, I know you, but a lot of our listeners may not know you. So can you please share with them a bit about your story and how you got to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I promise not to kind of, as some people may do, kind of go on and on and on. But I was born in August 24th, 1977. So that was a key moment in my life. And really spent a lot of my career. I started off actually teaching English in Japan, but actually part of the JET program, which stands for Japanese Exchange and Teaching. That was my first role out of uni. So that was my first experience, literally in the classroom, teaching 40 or so children English, team teaching with a Japanese English teacher. Did that for 2 years, fell in love with that, left Japan, travelled around Asia by myself, arrived back in London, miserable, went to Copenhagen, of all places. And that's where I started selling stuff. And I think a lot of people in sales will tell you that they didn't wake up one day and say, I know exactly what I want to do with my life. I want to start selling stuff. You kind of just fall into it. But I think a lot of people have that in their careers, but especially selling. And I was selling things for 18 years of my life. I went from Copenhagen, where it was kind of a boiler room environment. If you don't know what a boiler room environment means, it basically just means cold calling, and you're on the phone all day, every day. But that taught me now, in retrospect, a lot of the skills I leverage to this day. I didn't realize that at the time. I do now. And then in my kind of mid-30s, after getting married and having 3 children, I had a bit of a crisis and really kind of got to that point in my life where some people would class it as a midlife crisis, I suppose, because it was the middle of my life. But it was a crisis, but it was more asking, what is this all about? Because I was just kind of doing that usual commute, working every day, but no meaning to it for me. And cut a long story short, I was getting some advice and some counselling by a psychologist. And on the third session with him, he said something to me that just broke something open for me. And the phrase was simply this: your mind doesn't know what to think, it believes whatever you tell it. Your mind doesn't know what to think, it believes whatever you tell it. And it will always put a smile on my face when I hear it, because it just takes me back to that, and it just cracked something open for me. And what that did is it gave birth to a dream, and it gave birth to an understanding kind of really what I want to do with my life. And that was to speak and communicate, become a professional communicator. Now, arguably, I was anyway, because I was in sales, but I meant about something that had some value and meaning to me, and which I hope then I could communicate and help others and serve others. So then that made me kind of transition a little bit. And now I'm a professional trainer and facilitator at Oracle. So I help Oracle in their teach and facilitate and coach the sales organization within Oracle. And in many cases, that takes me all over Asia Pacific doing that. And that really helps me hone that skill of being able to engage and teach and transfer to people. But I also have a love affair with public speaking. And I've been able to do quite a bit of that, and increasingly so since that time. And that time with the psychologist was about 6 years ago. And life has kind of changed since that point in time. So that's a very quick synopsis.
That is very quick, but you've really touched on some pivotal moments in your life, particularly. I mean, what's happened now, what I'm hearing is you've sort of come full circle. So you were teaching in Japan, then you went to Copenhagen for sales, and now across APAC, you're delivering sales training. So you're combining all these things. That the power of that question, I love that was such a watershed in your life. It seems when I talk to different people, they might have, they're just progressing through life and there's little moments that shape them, but that was a big moment for you. What do you think it was about that question that really blew you away?
It's a really good question, actually, and I've had a lot of time to think about it. And at the point in time, I couldn't explain to you what happened. And what happened was just an absolute release. And I did a speech in the US last year, which gave the story. And it was like I said in the speech, I walked in kind of losing. When I walked out, I felt I was winning. And it was just a moment in time. There is a much more kind of deep, as time has gone on, I've been able to get a much better understanding of what happened. And there's a fairly deep and meaningful explanation to it, and there's a quick explanation to it. But basically what it was is what I learned and what was given to me in an instantaneous moment was an understanding that I was making choices. And in fact, that we all have choices to make. But what the awareness that was built through that thing being stated to me, your mind doesn't know what to think, it believes whatever you tell it. For me, it's obviously what I needed to hear at that time, because it taught me something to understand. I'm making a choice here. And I'm making a choice of things I didn't think I had a choice about before hearing that. And that choice was around the way that I think about me, about the world out there, about the people I'm with, about my emotions, about my state, about what I say out of this very important tool that is my mouth. And so there are choices that we make, and it was building awareness to understand that, in fact, there are things that we don't think are significant, or we don't think what we have as an individual and the choices that we make are important. But in fact, they are. And you can be really, really deliberate with those choices. So that one little phrase, I realized that I walked out and I thought, hold on a minute, I'm making choices to be and feel this way. I don't need to do that. So that was the revelation. And that's what I call it. It was a textbook dictionary definition of an instant revelation.
Yeah.
And it was a phenomenal moment in time. And I will say that, having listened to podcasts for so long, and you talk about these moments in time, and you think, oh my gosh, that man's life must have just radically changed. Life went on. But right. It didn't suddenly like, whoa, and my whole life become this like rainbow and rabbits and sunshine. But what it did do is it taught me, and to this day I'm still learning about it, but it taught me to understand and to be aware of. That was the key thing. I realized that in many, many cases, people feel stuck because they're just not aware of some things. And if you can become aware of it by going to a speech or listening to a podcast or reading a book, in many cases, you can progress yourself. And that's essentially what happened that day. So I've just been able to progress with what I've learned. That was it.
That's so cool. And I'm reading a lot of books at the moment about what we put into our mind. And even sort of recently, I've tried to pay attention on when the thoughts that I've got going on aren't serving me. And it's usually around the 6 p.m. news. Like the news is on, just happens to be on TV, and it's all negative, and you just get down with what's happening in the world. And then you think, okay, really, is that serving me at this moment? Yes, it's nice to have a bit of an awareness, but what's that doing to the thoughts that are going on in my brain? I'm not in a healthy state after listening to this. So let's just not do that and step away from it. And you're right, absolutely. Consuming podcasts, all of that stuff that our listeners are currently doing is just raising that level of awareness and challenging, I guess, our existing thoughts. But I also think it's encouraging that you said it wasn't this massive sort of turning point where it was raining sausage dogs.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it? If it
I know.
actually did.
I have a sausage dog. I know.
I do, yeah, that would be phenomenal. And it wasn't. And I think that's part of the issue with society, isn't it? That in so many cases, we look at these images and we see things and we hear people speak. We just think, oh, they got it all sorted, right? No one has. I don't think,
No,
right?
no.
Everyone wants to get to their next level, right? But what the empowering thing is that we all have the choice to get to that next level. And one of the first things I did, and again, it was almost visceral, if that's the right word to use, is I was cleaning up outside the house a few days after seeing a psychologist, and there was CNN on our TV. Now, I can tell you this, I've listened to CNN a couple of times in a hotel room since. But literally from that day, I said to my wife, you know what, turn it off. Because it's that revolving news. And I realized at that point that the way that you think, how you think, is really important. And what you allow yourself, what you deliberately allow yourself to dwell on and meditate on. And in a lot of cases, that is fed to us by what we hear. And in a lot of cases, you're not consciously aware of knowing what you're thinking about. And so I realized that listening to that was injecting into me the equivalent of me just kind of maybe eating just saturated fat. And I wouldn't do that to my body. So why would I do it to my mind? And so I turned it off, and it's never been on the TV since. And in fact, I just turned off, and you hear this a lot, and everything I'm saying you hear a lot of, but I don't think you can say it enough, really. And that is, we don't watch terrestrial TV anymore. And I think a lot of people are kind of turned off the TV because it doesn't nourish you. And there's so much stuff around how you nourish your physical body. Well, I look at it the same as what's the food for your mind, and what you do. This is food for the mind. It's nourishment for the mind. Right. And that's why I love it so much.
Me too. And actually, often a question that I might use when I'm meeting friends or new people is, do you listen to podcasts? And if so, show me what podcast you're listening to, because I want to know what they're nourishing their mind with. And it kind of gives you a good insight into the type of person that they are, what they're interested in. I want to pick up on a comment that you said when you had that appointment with your psych, and you said you walked in and you felt like you were losing, but then you walked out and you felt like you were winning.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, just bringing it into facilitation, that's how I usually want my participants to feel, like maybe not losing when they walk in, but they're walking in, it's a status quo. And I guess my goal as a facilitator is for them to walk out winning. I love that. I've never even thought about it that way. So thank you for putting it so beautifully. And when we caught up in Brisbane, cracked me up when you were telling me about a moment where you had people winning in your workshop, doing something very unconventional. Can you please share that story of the movement that you brought into that room?
Yeah, I will. Thanks. And thanks for bringing that up. You're right. And do you know what? Whenever I start, I think I'll probably say this about 80% of the time when I'm facilitating or training in a workshop environment. And I say to people, I'm not here for me. I'm absolutely here for you. What does that mean? Well, it means that I want you to walk out of this room better off from when you walked in. And the inspiration of that line comes from that being that psychologist, because I know what that can mean for people. And so the inspiration around the story, or what we did in the classroom, comes from a wonderful man, Yamamoto Sensei, who was essentially my mentor. But I team taught with him in a very small town in Japan called Unoke, and it was the junior high school. A gifted teacher, born to do it, made to do it, loved doing it. And we used to have fun in the classroom with these kids. We'd have really good fun. And when I left Japan, it was quite emotional to say goodbye to that guy. And he said to me, Nick, never stop having fun in the classroom. It really helps people learn. And I went, done. And so I always try and inject fun. And so sometimes it can seem a little bit, I don't know, whatever. But I know that if you can inject it and it be spontaneous in some cases or unexpected, even better, because it just shifts your mind. And so I was teaching, co-facilitating actually, a class for a new sales team, a newly created sales team at Oracle. And the majority of the audience was male, and the majority of the audience was kind of my demographic and age group. So Top Gun, the movie, the first one, everyone's like, yeah, bring it on. And there's the new Top Gun one coming out, right? And so this was raised, I think, in the morning. In the afternoon, after lunch, and after lunch is a key one because, of course, everyone comes back a bit sleepy. So I came up with this harebrained idea that what I'd do is I'd get everyone to see if they wanted to sing the theme song to Top Gun, which is Take My Breath Away by Berlin.
So good.
And my co-facilitator said, no, I mean, not a chance they're going to do it, right? But you've got to take risks with this. I think I'm going to have a few virtual nods on that comment. You've got to take risks in life, but especially in training, facilitating and teaching and speaking. You've got to be willing to back yourself on the day, on the stage, and have a go. So everyone came back. Now, I don't want to elongate this story too much. The reason why I thought it would be a good idea is, so we were in an external training facility, and either side of us, the partitions were pretty good, actually. They were pretty soundproof, but what we could hear was laughing and joking on one side and clapping and stuff in the other room next to us. So I'm thinking, what are they doing? I want some of that. So I said after lunch, by the way, everyone, we've heard next door this way, clap and have a laugh. We've heard these guys here laughing a lot. But one thing we haven't heard is what? And someone said, singing. I went,
Yes.
So it played right into it. I couldn't believe it. And so, in fact, it was videoed. The footage was videoed. I didn't realise that. And I have around 40 grown men hollering "Take My Breath Away" from Berlin. And we did 2 choruses of it. I would say it was one of the highlights of my year last year. It was that brilliant. And it really set the scene for the rest of the workshop. It just raised the bar, and it just really helped the energy levels, and kind of, it really just allowed us to sail that ship, if I can use that, so to speak, So it was really, really good. It was really, really good. And then the other thing I do, just real quick, is I actually dance. Now, I know how this sounds, right? It's like, what is this guy on? Like, really? Are you a professional?
Yes, you are.
I really am. But what I do is I actually do that when people maybe are coming back late from things. And if I notice that's happening, I actually then say, and I surprise the people walking in late, but I just put on a really cool tune and I get them to dance with me for 30 seconds. And that's actually gone down really, really well. But the crazy thing is no one's late, because everyone that comes in maybe 2 minutes before the start time, like, oh, I don't need to dance. I don't need to dance. Oh, like, it's like a massive relief. I love it. But it's a fun way. It's a carrot and stick, but it's a fun carrot and stick, right? That's worked really, really well. And one thing I learned in Japan is the way to anchor a memory. How do you anchor something in someone's head? And I suppose since learning about the importance of the mind and learning a lot about that, I realized, how the mind works and how memories work. So what I do, the reason I do it, there is science to it, I suppose, in that sense. And I want to create an anchor of the classroom. If I can create an anchor that people can point to, like, for example, if someone said, do you remember the class that did this, that, and the other and trained you on this? Do you remember the classroom where you sang? Oh, yeah, that was brilliant. And what was the class about? Well, it was about this, that, and the other. I find that if you anchor something, it really helps someone learn. So that's the other reason why I do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited about Top Gun too. So I'm sure if I was in that room, I would be leading that chorus. But what an awesome song. Like, that is such an emotional song. And to have all those blokes that, look, that's the thing. These guys would have really bonded over that as well. And I love that it was videoed. Oh my gosh, that's classic. And the other thing about dancing, actually, one of my first jobs when I had a quarter life crisis and I didn't know what I was doing, more with my career, more so than life.
Yeah.
My friend and I would have a 2 p.m. dance party. So at 2 p.m., we'd just come over to my computer, would go onto Apple Music and just play something gangster and just dance for a minute. And honestly, the afternoon just went by so quickly. It was so much fun.
I guarantee to you, if the corporate world just implemented, there's a few things I think the corporate world should implement, but if there's one, I'd say create a room where people can go in, turn the music up to whatever volume they want, and just dance for a couple of minutes. I guarantee you morale, productivity would just fly through the roof. That's kind of the fun. I make sure to try and inject that in whatever classroom I'm doing.
I'd love to go to one of your classes if you do have that philosophy. Hey, so you mentioned you travel around APAC. I'd love to know, what do you actually take with you when you run these workshops? What do you pack?
Yes, a good question. And it's probably going to be the usual suspects. But the key thing is what I put them in, everything in. And that is a Willy backpack. It is my little soldier. It's my little buddy. I should give him a name, really, because that opportunity, that choice to be able to will or put on your back has saved me so many times. For example, in downpours, when it rains and there's big puddles on the street, put it on your back, saved. So that's really good, but it has to be pretty hard, pretty strong one. So that adds to the weight as well, unfortunately. But that's really an important part of my arsenal, so to speak. And then I also carry just pens. They are like socks. 2 go into the washing machine, 1 comes out. You put 16 pens in your bag and you come back with 1. That's not working. How does that happen? So lots of pens, lots of cables, HDMI, VGA, and spare. I'd say the other key thing, portable battery. That has saved me. And I'm talking about a mobile phone battery, but that has saved me countless times where I've gone, where you, no, and you go, no, it's okay. So I've got actually quite a big one. It's actually quite a big one. So it can charge the phone, one phone kind of 3.5 times, but it means then I can put that across any kind of mobile device that needs to be charged. That's been really, really key. And then obviously I take a pointer with me, but I've got one which is pretty cool where the pointer bit isn't a laser. When you press the button, it blacks out the entire screen, not grays it out, but leaves almost like a white spot.
What?
And I tell you, it's an interesting one because it really helps because every time I do it with people that I've not worked with before, and I do it for the first time, everyone turns into those little green things on Toy Story when the claw's coming down. And everyone goes, oh, like that.
What? Can you please share the link to that clicker? That sounds really dramatic and so much better than that. Yes. I mean, the laser's fine, but that creates a sense of drama, right?
Oh, it's a Bond moment. You really feel like, yes, take that in. And and then also I take one of the other tools, if you will, is I do video myself. Trust me, I don't like looking at myself on video, but it does help me sharpen the sword, as I say. And that means, around improving the way I'm delivering. And so I take a little tripod with me to put my phone in. And that battery pack, that portable charger, has helped me where the best place for the tripod is nowhere near an electrical plug. So I just plug the phone into the battery. Bob's your uncle. I've got, video that I can have throughout the whole session. So they're the key things that I use wherever, but especially when I'm traveling overseas.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I've also struggled with that point of filming while I'm presenting and running workshops. If you don't have a friend, it's difficult. So you've solved that problem with a tripod and battery. Can you tell me what you do afterwards in terms of looking at that video? Do you actually sit and watch the whole thing, or do you sort of go through different screenshots and look at your posture? How do you review it?
That's a really good question. And I do sit down and watch it. The first couple of minutes are a bit uncomfortable and you get over yourself. And then I watch it, and then I do actually watch the whole thing. Or there can be some workshops where I remember didn't say that right, or that didn't come off well, or what happened there. And I make a mental note, and I may even jot it down to remember to look at that bit, just look at what happened there. And so, but what I do, the way I deliver, and this is potentially could be interesting for your audience in terms of it's a recent innovation that I've made, but I do use PowerPoint. We do use PowerPoint to present. And because I know that there's such a hullabaloo about PowerPoint in our world, isn't there? Yeah. It's like, but I just hand on heart, I use PowerPoint. I'm sorry, right? But what I've done is I actually use the speaker notes component of that. And what I used to do was print out the PowerPoint in the speaker note view, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I'd have the speaker notes, but in physical format, but that wasn't working trying to get hand luggage onto a Singapore Airlines flight. So what I said to do is I've got to go digital. What I now do is I have a separate screen that essentially I cast my computer screen to. That's a bigger screen. And that means I can view the notes whilst delivering. The reason I do that, or the reason I raise that, is because the video helps me update those notes. That's the key to it. So one of the things when you're teaching salespeople, but anywhere in life really, but especially when it comes to sales, that's my world at the moment, is, the questions that you ask are really important. Number one, ask them, but number two, knowing how to ask a question to yield a response, right? So the same goes for us though, as facilitators. There's a question that really helps, and there's questions that are just fallen flat, no one answers. So it's also me taking a question that I've heard and hear the response, go, oh, okay, I better ask that next time. So I write down the questions I'm going to ask in those notes. And so the videos really just help me make sure the way I look at it about it on that note around walking out better than when you walked in is that I want to try and chip away and make every delivery just that little bit better, if you will, or more effective. And that the video helps me do that.
Yeah, you're right. Because I've certainly, last year I was running sort of similar workshops across different countries. And when it came to different modules, I knew there's that was really good. And I knew to update the slide to make it better, but I couldn't quite remember what were the key questions. So video would have been perfect. Or even, I guess, bringing my remote podcasting gear just to record the audio would have been really helpful as well, listening back to that and going, what actually resonated with people? Because you're right, every time you're sort of iterating as you go to make it better and better and better. So, I mean, I guess, and we could bring that example of going in at status quo and then winning. It's like every single time you're just getting better and better and better. And I don't think there's an end point to that. I think we just continue to improve.
You're absolutely right. And sorry to cut you off. But do you know what? If you do video, just a hint for anyone kind of newish to this, and I suppose I'm relatively new, for me being my profession now is training in a workshop environment. That's kind of what I do for a living. So I love it. But what I realized though is you've got physically you do things, you're just unaware of it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be, you look at yourself, you go, why are you doing that? So there was one particular class where I was fiddling with the top of my trousers. Why are you doing that, Nick? But I just wasn't aware of it. And I was looking back at the video and it was a distraction. I was like, why are you doing that? So an interesting thing is now that I've become, here we go, aware of it, it's such a key thing, awareness, and telling you that now, interestingly enough, now I'll look back at some of the other videos, stop doing it. It's just gone in, not doing it. But now I'm aware of it. If I know, okay, don't just keep your hands where they are. So you become aware of maybe the little ticks that you're not aware of, that you are like when you're standing in front of the car. So video is good, but I agree. I think audio can be as helpful. And I'll tell you one thing that I've learned really, really recently about being able to kind of track things that, so I've made a conscious effort. And one of the big inspirations was your year in review podcast about the word of the year, right? And so mine is to be consistent in everything.
Yeah.
But the key one is to get back to the gym, start lifting some weights and be consistent with it. And this time around, because there have been other times I've said that, as I'm sure everyone can appreciate and understand, is I've begun to track every workout I do. And I've never done that before. And it is well interesting how, in fact, just that practice has such an effect, or you can see that working in so many other parts of your life. So what we're talking about here is that video is essentially the Excel spreadsheet of tracking what you lifted. And if you lifted 15 kgs that day, go back and lift 16 and a half next time, right? That's what they encourage you to do in the fitness world. But the same applies to us when we're doing workshops. What's your equivalent of going from 15 kgs to 16 and a half? And the way of you being able to track that, know what that is, what that increased weight looks like, so to speak, is watching yourself or listening to yourself. It's a really key tool.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that tool with us. I agree. So this year, my word isn't consistency, but I think that's a beautiful and very smart word to have. I think consistency is what performance is all about. So I started this year, I've got a group challenge to run 2,020 kilometers this year. So in the month of December, I ran 40 kilometers. Now that I'm in this group challenge, I think I've run 120 and we're not even at the end of the month yet. So just a simple process, and also having a bit of competition helps as well. You sort of wake up in the morning, someone's 5K ahead of you. So you think, right, I'm running 5.1.
Yeah, come on. Exactly right. And I suppose what tracking the workouts have done for me is I've almost become my own competition in that sense. All right, you lifted 15 yesterday. Let's have a go at doing 16 and a half. Let's do this. And so, I think there is something to that where a notorious area of my life is around planning and tracking. And so going back to the gym, I've realized, hold on a minute, this applies to every area of your life. And it's just such a key way of becoming your own competition in that sense.
And the concept of tracking is also, I remember Tim Pence in one of my early interviews, he was tracking his self-care. So how much sleep he was getting, what he was eating. And so he could actually tell like when a workshop was really good, he could see what was going on in terms of what he was drinking, all of that. I think you're absolutely right.
Oh yeah. And I'm tracking food as well. And it's interesting when you do, you realize it makes you more mindful of what you're feeding your body and being more conscious. And of course, hopefully, working out and being more deliberate of what you eat come hand in hand, ideally, right? To help the efforts. But coming back to facilitators, one thing I've realized is the health and well-being of you as a facilitator, as a trainer, as a speaker is fundamental. And so in fact, not going into massive amounts of detail, but at work, I want to work with the facilitators to ensure their physical well-being. Mental well-being is a bit of a different thing, but at least the physical well-being, because one of the things around making sure you drive engagement and you help deliver a really effective workshop is I think you've got to be thinking about yourself well. And a big part of that is your physical well-being. And so, talking to my colleagues around what are you doing to be physically healthy, and that will include things like a little bit of a playbook, to say, you know, if you're traveling overseas, get there the day before, have a walk around, don't go straight to your hotel, have a walk around, drink loads of water and get to bed early. For example, like really deliberately do things, because I think when you take care of you, that will show when you're in the classroom, is my belief of it. So that's why I will become really consistent and really deliberate about that, because I think I feel accountable to the people in the room to take care of myself so I can give them the best possible experience.
Absolutely. I think facilitation is all about the energy and managing that. And it starts from within yourself. And often I find the tough thing about facilitation as well, I guess this is probably a first world problem, is like I enjoy traveling to these cities and I usually have friends in these cities.
Yeah.
And I feel like a bit of a geek when I said, look, I've got to be in bed really early, so I can't make it for a 7:00 dinner because, you know, but I think that's part of being a professional as well, is actually having those boundaries and making sure that, look, if I do want to catch up with people, maybe I do so at the end when my job is done and I can just because even when I'm out, like I go out to these dinners and I'm talking, I'm not present. I'm thinking about the next day. So I'm not present there. I'm not present with the job itself. So something to work on. Now, talking about consistency, I think you already demonstrate that just through social media. And that's pretty much how your profile's been raised, is through your commentary on LinkedIn. And I've got a lot of people sort of writing on LinkedIn and listeners that want to know more about not getting exposure on the platform, but how they can build their presence and their profile using LinkedIn. I think you're a great example of that. Can you share your approach to using it?
That's, again, a really good question. I still would treat myself as a still learning advanced novice. That's just come to my head. I don't think I'm nowhere near some of the people that I follow. I suppose that is one of the rules. You know, follow people that inspire you. You see them doing stuff that you want to emulate in a way. But I think definitely one of the things I've done over the last couple of years have become very deliberate as to who I connect with and who I allow, listen to how that sounds, to connect with me. So, for example, I think back in the day when we all got our LinkedIn profiles and just became kind of the, you know, like just connect with anyone we could, I kind of choose. And so one of the ways that I choose is that now if I connect with someone that I know's maybe not met me, or what would be like a second degree connection, but I know we've not connected in person or whatever, I'd always personalize the invitation and write why. Why do I want to connect with you? Where do I feel this connection is? And I always try and start it off like that. Whereas if I get a connection request and someone says press connect and I have no idea why you pressed that, then in days gone past, I've actually gone back to them and said, why do you want to connect? But then I don't connect. I say, why do you want to connect? What do you see as the connection? And I suppose that makes me, I don't know how that makes me sound, but I'm not being like nasty about people. I'm just saying I want to give that to people. And it's kind of nice when that happens back. So I'm really mindful who I connect with. And I connect with people kind of, I suppose, within the world that I want to learn more about. So that's going to be speaking, that's going to be teaching, that's going to be training, coaching, facilitating. And so what I've also done deliberately, and as you've seen, is become a little bit more proactive in sharing thoughts about something. And so I think the really good thing there is commenting and being true to yourself, but sharing your perspective on things. And that's really good to do in a post, but the groups are really good for that. And the groups are like these buckets of wisdom. They're phenomenal to be able to join a group and be participant there. And the last thing I'll touch on, and it's a recent thing, and it's a really important thing though, and that is, I don't know if you've seen it. I don't even know what the tool would be called actually off the top of my head, but you may have seen it come up saying these people have asked a question and it looks like you could be a person that could answer it. Have you seen that? So
in groups, yes.
Right. And it comes up on my profile. So I've always seen that for ages. And then finally just went, what is that? So I click on it. And it's actually other LinkedIn users that have been, I think, humble enough to pose this kind of, that it's like, I'll tell you what it's like. It's like someone's put a note in a bottle and passed it out to the ocean, waiting for someone to pick it up. And so I went, I'm going to help out. And there was a couple there. I thought I could actually help with that. So I said, do you want some help? And it goes to them as just a LinkedIn message, but it says someone has picked up on your message in a bottle, so to speak. Do you want? And then that's it. And I've actually engaged and working with and talking to a couple of people that said, yeah, I'd love to get your perspective. That's been a really nice way of leveraging the tool and being of service and helping other people, which I just think is a thing that we, again, should try and incorporate into what we do.
And I like what in your response, you didn't really talk about any tips or hacks or shortcuts. It was really about, how do I get to know this person in more detail? Why have they reached out? What questions can I help them with? And I think that sort of shows in your ability to respond to comments. Like, you don't just write great quote or whatever. It's like, this is why this is important. And it's quite thought-provoking. So you can tell that you spend the time to personalize what you do on LinkedIn. So what I'd encourage listeners to do is, if you do want to connect with Nicholas, definitely, you know what, I don't need to tell you what to do. I think you just heard it from him.
I'm sorry. No,
but it's a really good example. It's a really good example of someone to follow.
I feel like really right. I feel like I'm just going to put my head down on the video.
No. I think it's setting a really great standard there, for sure.
Yeah, and if you remember, and someone tell me, please, say it in whatever, tell me. I'm sure when LinkedIn first launched, it actually told you to say something why. It was part of the whole system. And so I think it still does in little grey, but it's become a bit more lenient, let's say, in your ability to connect with people. So I just think it's a nice thing to do. But I mean, if you do want to connect, love to connect. And if you just say, was listening to Leanne's podcast, that would be more than enough. Honestly. Yeah. So
that's hilarious. I love it. No, I think it's all about setting a great standard and consistency. There you go. Absolutely. Now, it's funny that you spoke about a question that get asked on social media that you can sort of help with. On the Flipchart group on Facebook, I think a common question, it's usually once a week or once a fortnight, someone will ask, hey, I need an icebreaker or need an activity for a new team, or I've got a workshop coming up, can you share a cool activity? An icebreaker or activity that you like to use, that's your, you kind of lean on it, but it's reliable and you enjoy using it.
Yeah, I don't get too overly complex with this one. So in terms of icebreaker, I do everyone kind of introduce yourself, but all I do is I just incorporate a little ball, and then that ball is kind of gamify it a little bit. This is better in a bigger room because, of course, if you've got like 7 participants, it's a bit odd throwing it to the person next to you. So in a bigger room, it's getting the ball, you introduce yourself, and then you pick someone, and obviously I write instructions, you're not playing baseball, people, and also it's not hardball. And the person just lobs it to someone that they then want to then introduce themselves. So it gives a bit more ownership, if you will, to the audience in terms of who they want to hear from and whatnot. So that's a little tool that I've used to get things going.
Yeah, and I love that you're using movement as well. Just when you were talking about that and you brought in that caveat of, hey, it's not baseball, and like that's funny. You're using humor. That just comes out of you in conversation, right? Or have you really worked on your humor? Because it seems that you could go in with a pretty boring training package, or I'm sure it isn't, but through the way that you deliver it and adding like one-liners like that can really change the tone and feeling in a room. Is that something that you've worked on?
Yeah, the honest truth is I've not cultivated the ability to make people laugh. I've never even done an open mic or anything like that. Really, really want to. But my apart from being petrified, let's just be like hand on heart, but also I've always enjoyed making people laugh, and I've always found I can make people laugh, but I've never hung my hat on it, so to speak. I've never done anything with it. I've never done an open mic because it is a very spontaneous thing for me to make people laugh. And in fact, when I've done some public speeches, people who know me say, how are you going to be able to incorporate your ability to make people laugh? You've got to try and make people laugh. And the speech I did in the US, I did one line that was very carved into the speech, and it did get a giggle. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. There we go. But I think, in workshops, it is really important to be able to do things and take a risk. And I think in a lot of cases, I hear something in my head that I think, oh, that's funny. And I think I wouldn't say that. But in some cases, I go, no, I'll just let it out, see how it goes. Yeah. And when you do get a laugh, I find it can really help the audience. But one thing I would say, and it is tricky because I suppose I'd love to, maybe I will, on LinkedIn start connecting to comedians, because I think that's an area I would like to learn more about in terms of how can it be engineered? Can you manufacture it? Obviously you can, because, all the comedians that we know manufacture their comedy, right? But for me, it's a fairly spontaneous thing, but something I do enjoy taking a risk on and being spontaneous with. If I don't know whether that's helped you, but that's me just giving you a candid response.
Yeah, and that's absolutely how I'm not known for my humor, but you're right. I'll get this little voice in my head going, oh, you should say this, or just, and it feels slow, but you've got to say it in the moment. You sort of make a split decision, like, is it worth it? Is this the environment where I can say it? Sometimes I've been like, nah, but I have said it and it's worked beautifully. So it's hard sort of judging. And I think delivery is really important as well when it comes to that. Yeah, it's you're right. I don't know how to finesse it, but like you said, maybe it's worth exploring, maybe even getting a couple of comedians on the show. Who are your favorite comedians, by the way, before we wrap up?
It's in fact my daughter. She's got a real funny bone in her body. She's the one that comes out, Dad, you got to listen to this. And they are generally really funny. And she loves like Cole Barron. True Aussie.
Yeah, I love Cole Barron. Yeah,
he is so funny. If you've not heard him, do search, because that's the worst. Trying to regurgitate another comedian's joke won't do it. But if you search for Cole Barron, Plane and Fire, then that's a quite funny one. And good old UK Mr. Michael McIntyre. He's generally
brilliant.
He is a funny man, and it's because he doesn't swear very much, which is what I kind of like as well.
No, he's great. I've put a few of his videos on, like just before lunch is over. So like 5 minutes before lunch is over, I'll just put one of his videos on, and people walk in, and they can pick something up. Like you said, he's usually pretty clean, so he's a safe option.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
Nick, it's been like tremendous having you on the show. I know we could have just spoken for hours. There's so many topics we could have explored. I know when listeners don't like hearing that because like, what else could we talk to Nick about? But I'm sure they'd love to connect with you and find out more about what you do. And thank you for sharing like a vulnerable story as to what got you here and what you're doing now. And maybe you sharing that question of raising your awareness might actually impact a few of our listeners who are trying to make a breakthrough and trying to change some things in their life. If listeners would like to reach out, where can we send them?
Yeah, so I didn't realize how brilliant this is until someone said, that's really good that you got that. And that is, it's easy to connect with me on LinkedIn because I was a user when it started. So I actually nabbed my name as the URL. So I think the nomenclature is, it's Nicholas King, but there's a few Nicholas Kings on the planet, right? And a few of them are on LinkedIn. So if you do linkedin.com/ I think then you type in, and then / Nicholas King, you get me. I got the Nicholas King URL. So, and I didn't really care about that until very recently when someone said, that's good that you got that. I said, is it? Okay. So that helps in shows like this. So yeah, Nicholas King on LinkedIn is going to be the best way. Love to connect. And I've got my own little personal website, which touches on what I learnt, the awareness all the way back then. And it's called thinkingmechanics.com. And it's really what I heard this phrase, I love it. It's my little slice of the internet. And it's just where I share, I suppose, my perspective and my thoughts and the things that I've learned along the way around the choices that we have as human beings. So it's thinkingmechanics.com is another place that you can get in touch with me. Oh,
brilliant. And we'll link to all of that, plus Cole Barron's video in the show notes for this episode. And Nick, it's been tremendous having you on the show. Again, great to meet you. And I'm sure listeners will pick up a lot from this. Thank you for sharing both the philosophy of what drives you as well as some really practical things. And we might have to have a first-time facilitator Top Gun 2 watch party globally. Just everyone sending selfies of where they're watching the movie. I can't wait for that to be released.
Or even, let's put the challenge out, Leanne. Anyone that wants to send Leanne footage of them singing Take My Breath Away in their workshop, then I think should we put the challenge out there?
Let's throw it out there. Yeah.
Should we? Let's do this. I'm personally very excited about that.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So we're going to have to time this when I think it's being released in June. I might be in San Diego around that time. So I want to go to all the Top Gun locations, but we won't wait till June because this has to go out earlier, but let's set the challenge now. And between now, during its release, we'll figure out a way of making it happen. And I love that.
It's good, isn't it? And I want to say before to close, thank you very much for letting me be on your amazing platform and for you being a podcast that has really helped me in sharpening the sword when I'm in the workshop. And so I think it's brilliant what you've done and you're an inspiration and keep going. And it's been a joy and a privilege to be on a podcast. And I said this to you before that one of my dreams is to be on a podcast that I love listening to. And you've just allowed me to tick that box, literally. So I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you. And thank you very much for letting me be here today.
That means an awful lot to me. Thank you so much, Nick. Hey, thank you so much for listening to my interview with Nicholas King this week. Definitely shoot him a LinkedIn request and tell him that you heard him on the show. And of course, if you do a Top Gun rendition in your workshop, you've got to let us know. You have to let us know. That's the challenge throwdown for this week. Stay safe, be unpredictable, use a bit of contrast in your workshops, and catch you next week. Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight, and make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.